Something just happened inside the WNBA All-Star Weekend planning that nobody saw coming, and the ripple effects are already spreading fast. Cheryl Reeve is coaching one of the two All-Star squads set to face off in Chicago this weekend, and she's reportedly about to make a captain decision that has the entire league talking before a single tip-off even happens. The name she's leaning toward isn't the one most people expected, and the player who usually gets that nod without any debate, she's reportedly already making moves behind the scenes in response. This is one of those situations where everything that's been quietly building for 2 straight years is suddenly about to come to a head in one weekend, in one city, with cameras pointed at every single second of it. Reeve's reported pick for team captain is Caitlin Clark, not the multi-time MVP, not the player with 3 championships on her resume, not the veteran who's worn that armband before without a single person blinking. Clark, a player in just her 2nd season in the league. And the reasoning behind that call, according to what's been circulating, isn't about seniority or rings or any of the traditional things a coach might point to when handing out a leadership role. It's about what Clark represents right now, for a league that's celebrating its 30th season and desperately needs its biggest possible showcase moment in front of the largest possible audience. That's the reality Reeve is operating in, and that reality has a name, and that name fills arenas. Before you even get to the politics of the captain decision, you have to understand what Clark just did on a basketball court, because it's the entire foundation for why this conversation is happening at all. In her most recent game against the Seattle Storm, Clark dropped 45 points and dished out 10 assists. Those numbers alone would turn heads in any era of the league, but the context around them is what makes it genuinely historic. She became the first player in WNBA history, not the first guard, not the first Fever player, the first player in the nearly 3-decade history of the entire league to post a 40-point, 10-assist performance in a single game. That's a record that didn't exist before Clark walked into that building and created it from scratch. What makes that night even harder to ignore is the conditions it happened under. Clark wasn't playing 40-plus minutes with the game on the line and every shot falling. She was capped under 30 minutes of floor time. Seattle threw double teams at her every single time she touched the ball and sent extra defenders at her every time she tried to create off the dribble. They game planned specifically to limit her, and she still produced the most statistically dominant guard performance in league history. Kelsey Mitchell added 30 points of her own in that same game, and the two of them combined for 75 of Indiana's 110 total points on the night. That's not a hot shooting night where everything lines up perfectly. That's a player operating on a completely separate level than everyone else on the court, teammates included. When a coach looks at that kind of output and starts thinking about who leads her all-star squad into a nationally televised exhibition, the math isn't complicated. Here's where things get genuinely tense. A'ja Wilson has reportedly said she needs to sit down with the players before this weekend gets fully underway. Multiple outlets have pointed out that comment is aimed specifically at Clark, not just the team in general, following a string of referee confrontations that have had fans debating for weeks about who actually gets the benefit of the doubt on that court. The irony in that framing hasn't been lost on people paying close attention either. Wilson has had her own run-ins with officials over the course of her career, and most of them got brushed off by the media without much follow-up. Clark addresses a referee during a game, and it becomes a national story with think pieces attached within 24 hours. That double standard is real, it's documented, and it's been sitting underneath this whole situation for a while now. So before these two even share a bench together in Chicago, there's already genuine friction in the room, and that's not before you stack a captain decision on top of a pre-planned players meeting that's already been called. You've essentially taken a powder keg that's been sitting there for 2 years and placed a lit fuse right next to it. Wilson and Clark aren't on separate rosters where they can keep a comfortable distance and let the tension play out from afar.
They're teammates for this All-Star game, same locker room, same bench, same game plan, and now, apparently, a captain's role that isn't going the direction Wilson is used to seeing it go. That's not a small wrinkle heading into a weekend built to celebrate everything the league has accomplished over 3 decades. This tension didn't just appear this week. It has roots that go farther back than most people want to give it credit for. And once you trace them, the picture that emerges is a lot more complicated than a single interview comment or a single captain report. Back in December, Wilson sat down with Time magazine after being named their Athlete of the Year, and she said something that landed hard in certain corners of the league. She said the hype around Clark's rise erased WNBA history for a minute. She added plainly that she didn't like that. She was careful with her framing too, making sure to note that her issue wasn't with Clark personally, but with fans who overlooked the players who built the league long before Clark ever stepped onto a WNBA court. That's a fair point to raise. Wilson has 3 championships, 4 MVP awards, and a resume that puts her among the best players this league has ever seen. She's earned every right to speak on the league's history and what it means to her. But here's where the pattern starts to show itself. She keeps bringing it up. Almost every single media cycle that revolves around Clark, whether it's a magazine profile, an award announcement, or a random press availability, Wilson finds herself somewhere in that conversation. And that's before you factor in the 2024 comment, where she admitted she dreaded playing in front of Indiana Fever crowds specifically because of how loud and overwhelming the attention around Clark had become by that point. Connect that admission to the team meeting request this week and the captain report dropping at the same time, and what looked like a series of separate frustrated reactions starts to look like a more consistent pattern that's been quietly building and resurfacing every time Clark hits another milestone that grabs national headlines.
The league's own commissioner has been pulled into this more than once, and the things he's said publicly about Clark tell you something important about just how far beyond basketball this whole situation has traveled. Just last week, Adam Silver was pressed by reporters about the ongoing noise surrounding Clark, including a suspension report tied to one of her recent run-ins with officials. His response was to call her a political football. That phrase, coming from the man who runs the entire league, says a lot without saying everything. Silver is essentially acknowledging out loud that Clark has become something much larger than a basketball player at this point. She's a symbol that different groups fight over, way beyond anything that actually happens between the lines during a game. This isn't the first time Silver stepped in either. Back in 2024, when Clark took a hard, flagrant foul from Kennedy Carter that had people talking for days, Silver publicly called it a welcome to the league moment, while also making a point to note it wasn't out of the ordinary. He's been walking that exact line for 2 full seasons now, trying to protect the growth Clark represents for the entire league without adding any extra fuel to fires that didn't need more oxygen. The fact that the commissioner of the league has had to weigh in multiple times tells you everything about how high the stakes around Clark have gotten, and it makes Reeve's reported captain decision feel less like an isolated coaching choice and more like the latest chapter in something that started long before this weekend was ever scheduled. What makes this All-Star weekend genuinely different from any that came before it is the level of visibility every single decision is happening under. The league didn't just set up the usual All-Star format and send players to Chicago. They turned the entire team selection process into its own broadcast event. WNBA legends Cynthia Cooper and Teresa Weatherspoon served as honorary general managers and drafted the rosters live on ESPN as part of the league's 30th season celebration. Every pick, every reaction, every moment of that draft was captured on camera and broadcast to an audience bigger than any All-Star selection show this league has ever put together. That context matters enormously for what's about to happen this weekend. There is no quiet way to hand Clark the captain armband over Wilson. There's no behind-the-scenes move that keeps this contained or limits the reaction. Everyone watching, and a lot of people are watching, is going to see it happen in real time, and the response is going to come fast from every direction. The online split is already forming exactly the way you'd expect.
One side points out that Clark is the one driving TV numbers, ticket prices, and jersey sales, so of course a coach building a broadcast showcase leans toward her. The other side argues that Reeves just poured gasoline on a situation Wilson was already trying to handle quietly with the team before the cameras got fully involved. Neither of those takes is entirely wrong, and that's exactly what makes this so hard to look away from heading into tip-off. Here's something that's worth saying plainly, even if it makes some people uncomfortable. A lot of what's being framed as concern about history and fairness in how attention gets distributed across the league is really something simpler underneath the careful language. These are accomplished, decorated, genuinely great players who aren't used to sharing the spotlight this dramatically. For the better part of the WNBA's existence, the league's biggest stars occupied that top space without much competition for the attention. And then Clark arrived and reset every single baseline for what generating fan interest looks like in women's basketball. That shift was fast, it was massive, and it was undeniable in the numbers. Clark didn't take anything away from anyone by scoring 45 points against Seattle. She didn't diminish anyone's championships or MVP awards or what they built before she ever got to the league. She simply played basketball at an extremely high level, and the numbers did what numbers naturally do when a player performs that well on a given night. But sharing the top of the spotlight with someone who commands it that completely is genuinely uncomfortable, especially for players who spent years earning the right to be at the center of the conversation. That discomfort is understandable on a human level. What's harder to justify is when that discomfort keeps getting dressed up as something more principled every single time a camera turns on.
Here's what's actually interesting about Clark's side of all this, and is worth paying attention to because it tells you a lot about how she's built for exactly this kind of pressure. She's not clapping back at anyone publicly. She's not posting subtle jabs after wins or dropping pointed quotes in press conferences when reporters try to bait her into a response. She's averaging historic numbers night after night and letting the box score handle whatever talking needs doing. That approach, quietly outproducing the surrounding noise instead of engaging with it head-on, tends to age a lot better over time than the alternative. And every time she puts up a line like the one she had against Seattle, she makes the argument for why Reeve is making this captain call, without anyone needing to say a single word about it out loud. There's also something specific about how basketball settles its arguments that the press conference circuit and the magazine interview cycle simply cannot replicate. The game itself is ruthlessly honest. Numbers don't carry narratives, box scores don't have political angles, and a 45-point, 10-assist night on a restricted workload against a defense built specifically to stop you is one of the cleanest statements a player can make about where she stands relative to everyone else in the building. Wilson has said multiple times publicly that she plans to keep doing her own thing, regardless of what Clark's fan base does or what attention swirls around her. That's a reasonable stance, but if it's genuinely true, the most effective path to proving it isn't another interview or another reported team meeting request. It's going out in Chicago this weekend and outplaying the numbers Clark has been putting up all season long, because that's the only argument in this sport that actually closes a conversation for good. So now we arrive at Chicago, the league's 30th season celebration. Wilson and Clark wearing the same jersey on the same roster for a weekend that's supposed to showcase everything the WNBA has built over 3 decades. There's already chatter that Wilson wants a direct conversation with Clark the moment All-Star Weekend actually begins, whether that ends up being a private exchange behind closed doors or more comments dropped courtside with reporters and cameras close by. Either way, sharing a roster and now a captain decision for an entire weekend makes avoiding the topic basically impossible, even if both players genuinely wanted to leave it alone. But here's the prediction that honestly doesn't take much guessing, given everything that's happened this season. Whatever gets said in Chicago, whether it happens on camera or in some hallway nobody films, Clark is going to keep doing exactly what she's been doing all season. She's going to keep scoring in bunches against defenses throwing everything they have at her. She's going to keep setting up teammates for easy looks, and she's going to keep breaking records that nobody in this league's nearly 30-year history has ever come close to touching. The 45-point 10-assist night against Seattle wasn't a random explosion that happened to fall on the right night. It was a preview of what the rest of this season very likely looks like from here on out. The captaincy debate, the team meeting, the reported tension heading into the weekend, all of it will eventually get swallowed by the next performance, and the one after that, and the one after that. Because in basketball, the court always gets the last word. And right now, Clark's court has been very, very loud.